Oopsies.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to the Real Work Podcast.
Thank
This
you.
is Rachel Sobel, and she is just one of the top people I wanted to host early on in this podcast.
Oh,
because
are you gonna make me ugly cry already?
I mean, if
because
you
I'm
want.
very hormonal. Not because of pregnancy, because of probably
I was going to
menopause.
say, is there a big announcement?
No, definitely not. No.
But there's something about what we're trying to achieve here on the podcast is just authenticity and realness.
Mhm.
And ever since I've known you, and I can say it's been 30 years, which is so crazy. And we can talk a little bit about that at Pinecrest Day Camp, camper, counselor.
The connector, yep.
It is the connector. And there's something so real about being camp friends. And I think we've talked about this, but how do you feel as you've gotten older, those relationships, how they show up? And, we've all known you for 30, 40 years through that. So I think that that's such a good starting ground of kind of our history and where you kind of grew.
It's really funny, and it is a good place to start. I have a lot of friends from my past. Like, my closest friends are really from 30 years ago, from camp. I'm still friends with my friends from kindergarten. So I think part of that came from because I watched my mother nurture very solid and healthy female friendships. Like, her closest friends were her friends from the time I was born, or 1 or 2. So there were always these constant flow of really amazing women in my life. And I don't know if that's what made me a girl's girl or if it's just something you're born with, but I really have always been one of those people who thrives being around girlfriends. And I carried that throughout my life, and then picked up people along the way, right?
Yeah.
From camp to college to working for the first time and having coworkers that become friends and all that stuff. And people will ask me often, like, when they look at my content online, you're very authentic, you're very honest. Have you always been that way? The short answer is yes. I do feel like, I think that my personality has always been my personality. I think that we evolve depending on what we go through life-wise. I went through a divorce, I went through career changes, I went through moves through multiple states. So there were so many things in my life, some good and some traumatic. And I think you evolve from those, and it changes what you're willing to share at certain times. And there's that natural ebb and flow. But I think that ever since I was little, I kind of just like put it all out there.
I always feel with these strong female friendships, it kind of empowers me to be me.
Yes.
Have you found that where you're,
I have,
and
for
you
sure.
can sense it when you're like, there's something off with this person, and it's not that they're good or bad, but you just don't click. And to me, it's kind of that authenticity, who you are, and you can be yourself.
I think when we're younger, we become friends with people by circumstance, right? If you're in the same class, if you take dance together, if you play soccer, like, you kind of are just grouped with other kids. And sometimes you click and hit it off, so you develop friendships. And sometimes it's just for that season or whatever it is, and you move on. But I think when you meet people that you really gel with, and you can let your freak flag fly, right? And be yourself and make your stupid jokes or do a silly dance or do whatever. Those are the people that kind of stick around for the long haul, in my experience. The ones that come and go and are a little more transient are the more superficial friendships that are based on something like, maybe you had a mutual friend, or maybe you worked at a job together and you still like catching up, but you're not quite at the level where you're going to go out and get drunk with that person.
I always look at it like in sorority life, right?
Yeah.
And you would see different sororities all grouped, and I had a group of 20 girlfriends, and everyone looked at me like a weirdo because I had best friends in other sororities. And
God, how dare you, you monster.
And I even got my friend written up in standards because I was doing her sorority sign as a joke, which was hilarious. But it was just like, that to me, I always, when I think about like a proudest accomplishment, it's like the friends that I have that have my back, my ride or die, even in this transitional part of like my career and life and children. It's like, if I can call you and talk shit about my kids, or I have something going on with my husband that I need some advice, like, my friends are going to be honest, and they're going to call me out.
Yep.
They're going to be like, get it together, or like, that's okay, but I'm here for you. Let's get through this. And I think that gives me the confidence, and has given me the confidence to take risks, to make some of these hard decisions, because I've had that support network.
I agree completely. And I don't think I think it's underrated how much that strong female presence in your life bleeds into other areas of your life professionally. Like, the confidence to take a risk, right? Like, you are doing your own thing now. Like, you have made a big leap professionally. I did the same thing. And when I did it, I could not have done it if I didn't have that circle of people who truly believed in me, who pushed me, who supported me, who bought the first piece of merch that I sold, who shared every blog post. Like, those are the people that you can tell by action genuinely want to see you succeed. And I always say to people, especially with social media, because social media I have a love-hate relationship with it. And there's so many good things about it, but there's really a lot of ugly things too. And I think the competition and the meanness and all that kind of stuff, when you are, whether you're a content creator and your livelihood is on social media or you're just a person who's using it for fun, I'm of the belief that when there is anything that pops up on your feed that makes you feel less about yourself or makes you question yourself or makes you doubt who you are, you should immediately unfollow. And I think you do the same thing in your life. I think you have to edit your friends in real life too, because you're never going to reach your full potential and be who you are in every aspect of your life if you're surrounded by enablers who are just blowing smoke. Can I curse?
Yeah,
blowing
sure,
smoke up your ass. Not that that's a curse, but you know,
ASS.
ASS, tush, butt, booty. But I do think that, you know, the cornerstone of having those female friendships and truly supporting each other and having that ride or die thing, I think it does affect and splinter into the other parts of your life.
When it's, you know, for me, I am a people pleaser at heart, but I'm also like, once I hit that level, I'm not there to please everybody. And I think that's a hard part. And what I thought was really awesome about what you've done is how you've evolved professionally. And I want to know more about what was that moment that pushed you over the edge from going the corporate PR route. You were, I'm assuming, awesome at it.
Thank you.
How did you get through that decision-making process to finally say, you know what, I'm going to bet on myself and I'm going to do this full time?
So I have no regrets about my career. I think everything I did in my career, especially at those individual times, was amazing. I had a 20-year career in public relations, mostly tech stuff. When people hear that, they're like, what? Because it's so different, such a, you know, departure from what I do now. But I did love it and I was good at it. And I think that when you're in a field like that where everything is very fast paced, and at that time the pay was, you know, I worked really long to finally get like a good paycheck. I will never forget, and I tell people this in college all the time when they're choosing majors, like there should be classes at school that teach you about salaries and all those things, but in a very real way, because I came out of school pretty cocky with
6 figures,
a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. I'm like, I have a master's. I'm going to make like $80,000 minimum to start with. You know what my first salary was? $25,000 in a PR job with a master's degree.
I made more renting cars.
Right. So it's like
much more.
you know, I learned a lot. I paid my dues. I worked my way through the corporate ladder until I was earning respectable salaries that are much better than that. But it came with a price. It came with that exhaustion. It came with, as a new mom for the first time, juggling a career like that where you have clients. When you're client facing, there are clients up your ass constantly.
It's not 9 to 5.
It's not 9 to 5. And you know, you can say the things like, oh, well, set the precedent, don't answer. Well, when you're in a role where you are doing crisis communications or PR for something that there is something happening in that moment, you can't just say, well, it's after 5 o'clock. You can't.
No.
So I had a really hard time balancing that. And I think I did get into a good flow with her, and I became good at being a working mom, even though I felt really stressed out. And when I got divorced and I was living back in Florida, I had to take a full-time job again after taking some time off, and I was good at it. I liked it, but it was internal. It was very different from being in an agency world. There was no HR. So if things went awry, it was
every man and woman for themselves.
It was bad. And it was a privately owned company by a husband and wife. And so like there was no safety in terms of like if you had an issue. I think that's when my demise began. I think that I started to lose trust, and I started to look around, and I was only 36 at that time, 37, and I was the oldest one.
Wow.
And I was like, how am I going to have longevity in a place where not only are a lot of the people in management significantly younger than me, which is great, good for them, but they looked down on me and they were nasty, and there was a culture of mean girls, and it was, I will never forget it. I started crying almost every day when I got home, and I was like, I can't do this anymore.
This
like I have been through too much. I can't do this anymore.
No.
Like my sanity is not worth this. And I got yelled at in front of people by one of the owners of the company, which has never happened to me before. Like that has never happened.
I'm really good at my job.
And I'm like, and I didn't even do anything wrong. I'm not saying that to like, I didn't do anything wrong. It was just misplaced anger for whatever reason. I remember having that scene play in my head from Mean Girls where Lindsay Lohan jumps across the table and pounces on one of the other girls. And it's like supposed to be like a scene from Animal Planet, because I literally lived that moment in my mind.
But you were getting attacked.
No, I was going to attack someone.
Oh, you?
Yeah. I'd had it. I was sick of walking into the kitchen and
Mhm.
seeing these girls in their terrible, ill-fitting suits look me up and down. And like, I would be like, hi, good morning. And they would just stare at me like I didn't exist. And I was like, I
You
can't.
knew.
Yeah,
You knew.
that was my time. Like that was the moment for me when it clicked. And everyone asks me that. They're like, how'd you know it was time? Now, that being said, I didn't leave then because I had a child.
You
And I was
the
getting married
risk-
again and
Yeah.
all these things. We had a mortgage. Like, you can't just
Mhm.
like leave. So I spent like the next 3 months of that job working till all hours of the night, any freelance gig I could get until I could match my salary. When I matched my salary, I gave my notice and I left.
And the thing that I loved reading about you is like you kind of originated the side hustle before the side hustle. Seriously, because what I coach people on when they're asking career advice and this and that, I'm like,
Mhm.
if it's sustainable and you can test out your entrepreneurial muscles doing what you think you can do, you're going to find out really quickly if you can make it.
Yep.
If you can make money, if you're fulfilled, if you get that break even amount of money.
Yep.
And you honestly are probably one of the first people, at least that I've known, that did that early on. And did you, when you did that, did you have like a financial number where you're like, I have to make X to make this decision? Or how did you prepare for that?
Yes and no, because I think, as you know, when you start your own business, it's not like collecting a paycheck every month where every month you're getting X amount of direct deposit, it's going to cover your mortgage, your car payment, all that stuff. So it really started with my husband and I having very honest conversations like, listen, I have been depended on for a certain salary. So now I may make that, or I may make more, or I may make significantly less. And I just need to know that we're not going to constantly fight about money and that you're going to carry the difference. And he, from the beginning, was pushing me the most out of anyone. So I knew I had his support. And I think that made a huge difference. I didn't have a set number. My goal was just to be able to meet my salary.
Yeah.
As long as I could break even with my salary or even come close to it, I felt like I was winning. And there were months where I killed it. There were months where I was like, you want to go to Disney? Yeah, let's go. We have Disney money now. And I was like feeling good. And then there were months where like, you're getting McDonald's tonight. Like, and I think that's just real life with any situation that you're in. But I think you have to have honest conversations with your partner if you have one, and yourself. Like, you can't. And once you pull that cord to like go, you can't stop.
No. And if you're probably like me, I can't ever imagine working for somebody else again.
Never. I will never do it again.
No.
I would rather like live in my shed than ever work for someone again. And that comes with a price too, right? As a content creator, if I don't create content, I'm not getting money. So if I don't post on my blog or Instagram or whatever, I'm not getting paid. So I can choose to do that and take time off and take a vacation, but I am not built like that. And so everything is content.
Well, this is like which I hate when you talk about cringy, like boss babe, mama,
I hate it.
mamapreneur or whatever.
No.
I'm like, no, you're
hashtag blessed. No, get out of here. Get out. Canceled.
Canceled. Cancel that. I try not to cancel. Like, ugh.
I use it only ironically now, like purposely.
It's
like,
just get in there. But it's like people are like, go be, and there's so much risk that comes from it. And making it doesn't mean making it on your own. It doesn't mean making it corporate. It's like, what is sustainable to you and where are you fulfilled? And I do like a lot of work on like needs and values. And it's like, what makes me tick? And that stuff changes. Like, you have one child, then you have two children, and now you're married. And I think what's really cool that you mentioned, where your husband sounds a lot like my husband, is they were my biggest cheerleader. Like, I walked in the last day when I was at the Marlins, and my husband just saw it on my face. He's like, you're done. I was like, I am.
Yeah. It clicks, right? It's like a moment. It's just a moment.
It was. And I looked, I still see in my head when I gave my notice, I was like floating, like a free, like literally everyone's like, you look radiant. I'm like, I'm unemployed. I'm unemployed.
It's like when you get divorced and you literally lose weight without trying because you are so, everyone's like, you look amazing. You're like, thanks, I'm getting divorced. Like, it is the same.
Thanks, I'm unemployed right now. I'm not sure what I'm doing yet, but I'm figuring it out. But there's that level of support. And that's where it's like, you look at who you marry. Like, John knew when he married me, I was always going to start my own business. I always knew that. Didn't know where or when or what it was going to be. But I wanted to ask you, so like, obviously you've been through a divorce.
Sure have.
Yes, ma'am. Had you not gone through that, do you think you would be where you are today?
No.
With your
business? This would never have been.
Isn't that funny?
It would not have been a reality It would not have been supported. It would have been the opposite of supported. And I think, you know, we talked about before, like being authentic and like if you're like that younger in life and you end up growing up and evolving into that. And I can honestly say that my first marriage was the only time in my entire life where my entire personality and vibe and energy was muted. It was
But that's a long time to be muted.
long time. It was, I don't know if it happened right away or if it was gradual because it's hard to look back in retrospect, but it was the most miserable I ever was. And the weird part is that it was the happiest I was because that's when I had my first baby.
And it's hard though, because you can't.
The best thing in my life came from the worst. And that is a mind game like no one can ever understand.
It's like, because it's like you would never begrudge.
I would go through
all
knowing exactly the outcome now. And listen, it's not pretty now either. And we're 10 years out. So like knowing the outcome now, I would not even hesitate. And I would walk through hell over again to have her. But when I look at my life professionally and even just like my whole vibe and how I am, like I have never been more comfortable in my skin than I am now. And I never felt like that in my first marriage. So I would not have been able to like have that level of authenticity and realness in whatever I was doing.
Or as much content.
No, I would have like, I had zero content. I would like, it would be done. I would be like a Instagram dropout. It would never happen. I probably wouldn't have had an Instagram account.
But how do you, like, this is the funniest thing you do. What's the word? The confessions.
Yeah.
This is my confession.
Yeah.
Oh, tone deaf.
I would have sang it the same way. We could harmonize.
Yeah. God,
can you imagine?
No, it's so bad. I have zero skill in that. Why are people so free with what they share? Like I read some of these, I'm like, my life is vanilla and boring.
I know.
And I'm like,
I want to say to Jason, are you okay? Because I feel the same way.
I'm not that adventurous. But like, why do you think people are so like wanting to do, like, why are they posting some things that you're like, they would never say to their best friend? Like, why do you think people are doing that on your platform?
I think a number of reasons. I think that the people who've been with me from the beginning or the people who pop in and kind of get me, right? Like they're not there just to see like a random meme. They are there because we have a community. Like I hate the word followers. I hate the word, like, I don't feel like I built a following. I feel like I built a community because these are people that I talk to in DMs. These are people who have sent me beautiful emails and like amazing things. And like it validates every single choice that I make when I'm, using my platform for what I'm using it for. I think people trust me because I am very open about if I've had a terrible day because of co-parenting stuff or because of work stuff or because my kids or whatever. I don't shy away from that. And I don't share everything. There's some stuff that has to be kept private because of family things.
What don't you share?
So, it's interesting. I really only recently started talking about my first marriage in very general terms because I want to be respectful of the fact that I can tell my story from my perspective, but it involves another person.
Yeah.
And it involves my daughter. And so my daughter's still a minor. And, there are certain conversations that I'm not comfortable having around her or that she'll hear until she's an adult. And like we can talk about these things through a different lens when a lot of time has passed. So I have started talking about it because I do feel like it's kind of unfair to have a whole platform built on reinventing yourself and moving forward and healing and not at least talk about that sometimes. So I'm trying to get creative in how I talk about that without getting myself, into a situation that makes me uncomfortable. And I don't really talk about my current husband's family a lot.
Oh, that's smart.
I talk about my family a lot.
That could go real bad.
It's different. Like, you have a certain dynamic with your family where like, it's probably kind of understood that you're going to troll them. You're going to make fun of them. You all do it to each other. Like, that's how my family is. It's different when it's like in-laws. It's a different situation.
Absolutely.
So those are probably the two things that I really don't talk about a lot.
And you don't need to. I mean, I think you can.
No.
There's certain things like with your daughter, it's like you want her to have her own relationship with her dad. Without interrupted. And because you always hear people like long-term, they're like, oh, my mom or dad talks so badly about the other. Like, and you're like, like obviously we're not together for a reason, but
I'm never going to listen, people don't get divorced because they're happy. I mean, people get divorced because like really that's the end of the road, right? So if you want to be naive and think that there's not messiness and bad feelings and all that stuff, then that's fine to live in that fantasy land. You can still protect your kids from it, but you can protect them in a way where they know that it's not a good situation, but that it's not stuff that is necessary for them to be privy to.
And they're not mature enough to hear it.
Correct.
Really?
But,
I mean, it's...
Correct. But I think the confessions, that's part of it. I think I've built a really good level of trust with my people. And I think there is a phenomenon of saying things to strangers that you don't want to say to people in your real life, because like I've said a million times in like stuff that I've written, you're not going to run into that person in Target or in the preschool parking lot who you just told that like you had a threesome with your husband and his boss at like a work party. Like you don't have to worry about.
You see their names. That's where that's where I'm like, how even
do,
just one
but-
person know, not that you would ever
No,
share names,
but
it's
here's
like,
the thing about that, because people
wow.
ask me about that.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to sound like douchey when I say this. I get hundreds of those, like hundreds.
So how do you pick?
So I try not to repeat, because the one thing that people do that makes me literally like want to jump out of my skin is the minute I post a confession that says something like, my husband picks his nose and eats it and blah, 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 whatever. Then I'll get like 10 more confessions after I post that with something similar. And I'm not doing that. That ship has sailed. It's done.
Yep.
So I really try and just mix it up and not try and have everything be the same. But I'm being totally honest with you when I tell you that as I'm scrolling through them, I don't even have time to look at the names because I don't open anyone's account. I literally scroll through. If it looks good, post, add music, post. And I go through, and then I never look at it again.
Yeah.
So, and listen, I also think that some people who are posting it know that their name is there, but like, I'm not that person. What do I gain by ever outing someone?
Lose everything.
Yeah. So I the same way I protect my peace and my safe space, I really do feel a huge responsibility to people who come to my page for those things to interact, that I have to protect them too. And that's just how I feel.
But you also talk a lot about mental health. And I think now in this day and age, I feel like the stigma has decreased, right?
Yeah.
But then I think it's also swung so far to the other side that people are like, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, which they maybe go through experiences, but it's like, you still need to go and access those resources and go through the process and get a diagnosis and get on the right medication. And so like, when did you get comfortable talking about that? And do you get a lot of people that are like asking you for advice, maybe even so where you're like, I'm not a doctor, but I can tell you my story?
So that's the danger of social media, right? Yeah. And I think the problem is that there are many people who do the opposite of what you're saying. They will be like Instagram therapists or Instagram doctors. And I'm like, oh, did you get your degree from Meta? Like what happened?
Harvard?
Right. Right. So I think that people need to stop doing that. And I think the mental health thing, I think that has gotten blown so out of proportion in terms of people throwing their hat in the ring with things that really aren't in the same bucket as what we're generally talking about with mental health. But I think the same thing has happened with people talking about narcissists and abusive relationships and bullying.
Yep.
When the minute you start to use those terms in a way where you're describing someone who really isn't that thing, you dilute the importance of it for the people who have really experienced it. And I think we need to be really careful, because you are not a licensed therapist to say this person's a narcissist. If you have someone who's been diagnosed as a narcissist, you can say it, but like, don't go around like diagnosing people when you don't have that experience and you haven't done like a battery of testing. So I think it's the same thing with mental health. I think people, I think it's a double-edged sword, because people are being very gracious and amazing sharing their journeys, but I think there's other people who put too much stock in it sometimes and hold it instead of looking at it.
Clout.
Right.
Like, oh, I'm
yes.
Yeah, I agree.
You look on TikTok at teenagers, it's out of control how they're all talking about mental health and this and that. And on one way, it's great that they are talking about it, but there are too many that they're almost glorifying it.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same thing with that movie that came out that a lot of kids were engaging in like self-harm and suicidal ideation, 13 Reasons Why or whatever it is.
Which was
we have access to all this content on social media and streaming services. And as parents, we're not doing a good enough job protecting our kids to understand that you have mental health issues and we're going to address them. But go ahead and watch this movie that has triggers that are going to like set you off. So that's a whole nother podcast probably. But
no, that's scary. And like, how do you, I mean, you have a teenage daughter.
Yeah.
You're obviously all over social media. Like, how do you find that balance of like, you can or you can't?
There's no balance.
Like, how do you, if there isn't.
No. So we were one of the last to give her social media, and she hated us for it. Yeah.
Okay.
And when I say last, it wasn't like she was old. I think she was 12.
Which still seems so
Everybody had it. And we really held strong for a long time. But what was happening was that when your kid is not on social media and everyone around them is, they become alienated. Because when you're because when you're sitting and if you have kids, not even just teenagers, but if you have kids who have TikTok or Snapchat or whatever, they're using, I'm sure that you see them all sitting on your couch and there's like 5 of them and no one's talking. They're all on their phones. Yeah. Do we want it like that? No, it'd be great if they went and played outside, but our world is very different right now. And we have to, instead of trying to like force our kids to grow up the way we grew up, we have to evolve with them and just teach them how to use these things properly so they don't weaponize it against each other. So my daughter, she has her own social media accounts. I follow them. I check them. Occasionally I'll say, can you take this down? And she's like, I will unfollow you. I will block you. So like, there's no, like it's, and I think,
no.
and I think there's also a time where that ship sails as well. When your kid is in high school, you start to lose more control over that kind of stuff, because when you were in high school, if your parents would have said to you, don't write a note about someone in class that you like, would you have listened? No. So it's like the same thing. We just didn't have that platform.
So keep in mind, we had AIM.
We did really dangerous things.
Which is just where all the creepers hung out there
all
too.
The
so
creepers.
It's like, I'm like, again, it comes with, and I think it's just being aware of it. And I just, to me.
I think people share their kids too much too.
Well, totally. And I think for us is like, and when I think about like being you and being authentic, it's like social media for kids these days, it's like they almost are all following the trend, which again, there's trends with that's anything, but it's like, I look at some of my nieces and nephews and like, I'm very proud of them. Like they have phones, but like they are who they are. They have really, they were raised right, but it's also really scary to me because
it's very scary.
You see celebrities now, right? Now they're pulling up Twitter posts of these people from 20, 30 years ago. And yes, they might be very inappropriate, but in that time and in that position, it wasn't. It's just like movies these days, they cut out scenes. It's like, there's got to be some sort of...
I just think that a lot of it is going to be trial and error.
Yeah.
I think that you can put whatever monitoring devices you want, and all the parents who are listening to this who are going, oh, my kid doesn't have social media and she's not going to have it till she's 15. I'm going to tell you right now, she's either got a secret account on somebody's phone or she has a ghost account on her phone that's hidden in a locked folder. Yeah. And if you didn't know that locked folders existed on your phone, welcome to having a teenager. So like where there's a will, there's a way. It's the same way that we did stuff like my mom and I have conversations about kids vaping and doing all these things. And she's like, Rachel, did you not try cigarettes when you were a teenager? I go, yes, I did. She goes, so it's the same thing. They just have different vehicles for doing
just a battery now.
It's just a battery, and they say it's better for you, but when it's really terrible. But I think that these kids are not doing anything so different than we did. It's just changed and evolved, and we have to, instead of putting our foot down, have to evolve with them and learn to parent kids the way they're growing up. And that's just my opinion. And I also think with social media, people are sharing their kids too much, and kids are not content. And I say that having made that mistake early on, I feel like I shared a lot more of them. And if you look at my account now, it's very few. I don't share their faces a lot. I share stories, but most of the stories I share and that authenticity is coming from my experience.
Do you ask like your teenage daughter for permission? You do. I was wondering.
Yes.
Okay. Which is fair.
Yes. And I asked my little one too, but I'm not even comfortable sharing. There's so many sick people out there.
Weirdos, a bunch of weirdos.
And I work with a local organization here, the Child Rescue Coalition, that tracks predators online and keeps kids safe online. And it is jarring when you are in an office like that and you see a live map of like all these people that are just like sitting there waiting.
You're like, there's my house and there's all the weirdos.
And so I really made a conscious shift, I'd say, in the last few years where like, I do think it's unrealistic of me to share them never, because I talk about motherhood, but I really try and, people probably get sick of seeing my face because I really I really share mostly my stuff. I think it's irresponsible to create a digital footprint for a child that they have no control over. And then all those images what if they're 18 and they're like, why would you post a picture of me on a potty? Like, why would you do that?
Sure.
And by the way, not to like have a TED talk about it, just so you know, if you have like private social media accounts and you hashtag things, that immediately becomes searchable.
Wow,
because,
I didn't know that.
Yep. So like, if you hashtag mom life, whatever it is, if someone hits mom life and you have a picture of your kid in the bathtub, you're giving access to.
But that's a good point about the teenagers too, though, where they're posting and they hashtag. You think, okay, they're private.
Oh, they don't. They barely use hashtags. Are not cool. Like,
is that old?
Yeah,
is that old
I don't.
stuff?
I don't think. I think only old people like us do that.
So when you look at your future and like, have you ever thought about like, if I do this, I've made it, or do you not put those goalposts? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, right now for me, my end goal has always been, from the day that I started doing this, to write books.
Awesome.
And so for me, in the back of my head, it's like, I've made it when this happens. And it's not even like a monetary thing, because nobody gets rich off writing books. No. Like, it's a labor of love. But that's always been kind of like that pie in the sky. That's what I want. But along the way, it's like, okay, I remember when I first started, I'm like, if I can get a piece published in Scary Mommy, I've made it. Because Scary Mommy is like the mothership of all motherhood like publications. Yeah. So when I got that first byline in Scary Mommy, and I was like, oh my God, I made it. And then it was like, if I can be a keynote speaker at an event about motherhood, I'm going to make it. Check. So like, yes, I've checked all those boxes along the way, but I don't think I'll ever make it. I think I'm always going to be working towards something else, because I don't know that there's going to be I can't see my career like this just ending and doing something where I'm like, okay, I'm done. I think it's just going to continue to morph as I get older, as my kids get older. I mean, my writing has changed because my life is different, you know?
Exactly. Your content. So what is the book called?
I can't tell you what it's called because it's currently being, so it's basically about, you know, we were talking about mental health before. I never thought I had any, I mean, I always thought I was a little bit crazy, but I never thought I had any like diagnosable mental health anything. I've always been high strung, a little bit, you know, anxious, but I'm Jewish. So like that comes with the territory as well. But I really never asked for help in terms of therapy or medication or anything until the last few years. And so when I went on an anti-anxiety med and it changed my life, I was like, why did I wait so long to ask for help? Like, I'm not a proud person like that. What was it? And so I kind of dug into that feeling a little bit. And the premise of the book is basically like, we don't have to just accept, we can ask for help and whatever that means. And it's essays and stories. It's all anecdotal. So it's very memoirish, but it's being pitched right now. I have an amazing literary agent, but selling a book is really hard. There's a lot of noise. And so if there's any publishers listening, I'm your gal.
Check it out. Check it out. Well, it's also, I feel like it's so like opinion based, right? Like
very
it's
subjective.
Like who sees it, who reads it, who resonates, if they have the audience.
What their day was like that day.
Exactly.
I mean, all the feedback I get, honestly, has been, we love her voice. We don't need a memoir right now. Like, so it's never like we don't like the book idea. It's circumstance. And that's really hard.
It's really out of your control.
Out of my control. And that is really hard because I need to be in control.
Yeah, that's where you got to take
I am
another
a
pill.
typical firstborn type A child. And I need, I don't like unknown. I've gotten more comfortable with it because I think that if you don't, you will make yourself crazy. And I think the meds and therapy 100% help that. You know, you can control what you can control. But it's hard career-wise to have those things where you're just like sitting, waiting for someone to do something.
So what other projects do you have coming up? And, you know, what do you have up your sleeve? I know you will talk about your podcast with our man Dale.
Another PCBC alum. Yep. So I have my podcast, which we are now 56 episodes in.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Crazy. Called Friends Without Benefits with another friend of 30 years.
So good.
And it's great. We're having a really good time with that. So we actually just switched up production and that will be beginning again soon. So that's going to take up a lot of time. I am the keynote speaker for the Mother of All Baby Showers events in most
You've done
markets.
That before, right?
Yep, for about 7 years. Yeah.
Wow.
And so we go to Tampa November 10th is the last show of the season. And so I do a few of those a season and I'm always writing. I'm writing now for She's Got Issues, which is a digital publication, newsletter, website, whatever you want to call it, from the same person who started Scary Mommy and sold it.
Oh, wow.
So now I feel like she started another one. So now
wow.
I feel like my whole thing has gone full circle because when I got published and She's Got Issues, I'm like, oh my God, I started my writing career like writing about having babies, you know, like diapers and this and that. And now I'm writing about perimenopause and like, you know, marrying the wrong person and like all these things. And it really is pretty incredible to feel that full circle.
When you get that look back, right? Like I think you have this benefit of like retroactively looking back on your writing and you know, you had spoken about like when you first started, you were like, that's not me. What am I saying? And I feel like you probably saw a huge uptick when you really started saying your real voice, your real experiences, and people, you know, want to resonate with realness and people can sniff it out.
Oh, it happened with one article. Like it was one.
What was it about? What was the article
It was
about?
the hardest article I've ever written in my life.
Okay.
I sat on it for like a year and I cried every time I rewrote it. And it was about a miscarriage that I had suffered. Yeah. And I thought about like, do I need to share this? Like, what does this accomplish? And then I realized, you know, I started a platform to be very open and I share really funny stuff. At that point, I think I was the funny girl, right? Like I was the funny girl with funny stories. And there's no bigger compliment than calling. I think I'd rather be called funny than pretty.
Oh, 100%.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
So I had built my platform on that. And then I had this opportunity and I did it. And I wanted to throw up the second I submitted it. And it was on Pop Sugar. And the minute that article hit, it was different. The messages I got, that article was, oh my God, probably 8 years ago, 7 years ago. And I still get emails because, you know, publications reshare stuff. Yep. I still get emails from people who are like, I did not have the words, but I feel validated and thank you. And I still get like choked up even thinking about it, but
Yeah.
that was a defining moment in my career because that's when I got authentic in a way where I wasn't being funny and I wasn't using
You were
humor as a
vulnerable.
coping mechanism. It was a hard to read, gut-wrenching story, and it was a departure from anything I'd done, but I feel like it showed that I had a range of things that I could write about and different ways to connect to people, and that is what I've always gotten into this for, is the connection.
Yeah, and I think so many people can resonate with that and have been through that, and motherhood as a whole, we all have our own experiences. So obviously we talk about work and professional life. So if you were to give people one core piece of career advice, whether they're job changing, new career, old career, what would you say is the most impactful thing you could share with people as they navigate, what you do 90,000 hours of your life?
I think that that's such a hard question because like it depends to me if you work in an office or if you're working for yourself.
If you want.
So like I think if you are trying to make a career change, I think that you have to go into it expecting that it's going to be scary. You're not going to be like, I'm ready to make a career change. Let's go. Like if you're not terrified, you're not doing something right. Like it's a major leap of faith to do that. And I think that if that's your route, my advice is to be patient with yourself, to not do things, haphazardly, to really have a plan. And it doesn't have to be a rigid plan. It can be an outline, but you have to have some idea of where income is coming from, how it's going to affect your family, what you're going to have to do to save money, all those things. I think that would be my advice for someone launching a new career. If you're in a career and you're miserable, which is where I think a lot of people are, unfortunately, I think you have to have some really hard talks with yourself and you have to figure out what makes sense for you. And if you can turn your body off and go and collect your paycheck and treat it as a job and not a career, then that's what you should do. If you feel like you need to be fulfilled by something else, I think you need to do some soul searching on LinkedIn or talk to people or figure out something. But I think the biggest lesson career-wise that I'm learning myself and that I hope that my two girls are seeing is that if there is something that you are passionate about, there is always a way to monetize it. And it's not easy and it doesn't always come easy. And sometimes it takes years and sometimes it takes a million conversations and sometimes it takes failure. But the really good stuff comes from when things get really tough and ugly and gritty because you come out of it with lessons that you've learned. And I just hope that my kids, we're in a world now where people are not, look at what you're doing. Look at what I'm doing. We're not working all the time in offices 9 to 5. We're not like on Zoom calls every single second. Like it's evolved a little bit because of us, because of our generations.
Absolutely.
And I hope that our kids continue to take that ball and run with it. But I think you have to understand what you are passionate about and really ask yourself what you want to do.
I love that. And I think early career people, right, it's important for them to kind of put their time in and see what they do like, what they're good at, what skills they acquire, where they feel that little spark and notate that. And that's a big reason why we started Abe, was to say, you can be your authentic self and find the right role for you, but you've really got to do that deep digging to understand who you are, what you're about, what your skills are, and give yourself that time and that runway to figure that out. And then all of a sudden when those you get that fight or flight mode in your career, you may want to start taking a thought and a pause to say, okay, am I supposed to be here? What's my exit strategy? And I think we all kind of went through that, whether it's personal or professional. It's like, okay, this isn't for me. And that's okay. And I think when it comes to relationships with jobs, I hate to say, bad person, good person, bad job, good job. It's like, you're either the right fit for it or you're not. And that's...
I also think that we put too much pressure on ourselves with the whole job and career thing, right? Like this may be an unpopular opinion, but what's so bad about maybe your job offers you like incredible security, right? You can provide the lifestyle for your family you want. Maybe you don't love it. You're not miserable, you don't love it, and you have another passion. So make that passion a hobby, or sit on a board somewhere, or volunteer somewhere and collect your paycheck. If it's not eating at your soul, and you're just like, I don't love what I'm doing, but like it's funding a lifestyle that you can do those things outside of the home. Not everyone has to have this like lifelong career where they don't feel like they've ever worked a day in their life. That's not realistic.
And that's not true. You and I go through same levels of stress.
If not more.
Because it's a stress I like.
Because
I'm building what I love. But to your point, it's like, if it's sustainable, pause and take that moment and figure out other solutions around you. That's the only reason I did the stand-up comedy thing. I was really good at my job. I was bored. And instead of going to my company or being like, you owe me this and I need that and give me
It was an outlet. It was an outlet for you to do something you love.
I was like, let me go find something that's going to challenge me. I've never done this. And I ended up loving it, right? I wasn't going to go take my show on the road. You know, I had to fund a lifestyle, but it was such an amazing experience. So I encourage everybody to do that, right? Like even just like
get out of your comfort zone. I know it's the like most cliche thing to
say
every
year,
but but it's true. I think you have to. I think when you feel, and you probably know this having been through this experience and getting to where you are in this moment, that like fear, when you conquer it, the liberation that you feel is unmatched.
Totally.
Unmatched, regardless of how big or small the goal was. When you accomplish something that you set out to accomplish and you are scared to death to do it, and then you look back and go, oh my God, I did it. That is like the confidence boost and the liberation from that is priceless.
And look back on those badass moments to reassure you can do it. Because when those scary things happen, it's very quick to be like, I don't know. But look back and you're like, oh my gosh, I did that. And wait a second. And I did that. So it's
like, you don't know where you're going to end up. When I was a freshman at University of Florida,
go Gators.
Go Gators. And I knew the day I got to campus what I was going to major in because of someone I met at Pinecrest, who was my senior counselor. And I loved what she did. And so I knew I was one of those weird people who knew. I didn't know back then that I'd be abandoning a corporate career, getting divorced. I mean, when I look back at my Facebook posts from like then, it was like making chicken parmesan and I cringe and I'm like, oh, why would anyone ever follow me on social media when I was posting the most ridiculous things like that? So like I do look back at that and laugh and I'm like, I just made a whole career out of just being myself publicly and sharing embarrassing moments and shaving my girl mustache with a flawless while all these people are talking about hot girl summer, and it's working for me. And so I'm going to keep going that route. I mean, that's it. You just go until you can't go anymore.
And shave your beard.
And shave your PCOS beard or any other body hair you have. And if you're listening to this going, ew, that's gross, you just wait until you need car tweezers and the sunlight to get that chin hair that you feel, because it is happening and it's real.
So on that note, we'll end with
chin hairs.
Do stuff scary.
Yes.
Pluck your chin hairs.
Yeah.
But be authentic in
Always.
who you are, and get a network of people around you that bring out your authentic self, that you can be vulnerable with, you can be honest with, you can be who you are, because that's going to help you navigate this crazy. The unexpected is for everybody. No one knows what's ahead. You and I don't know. We don't know what's ahead in the year or next month.
No idea. But real begets real. It just does. You have to. You're not going to ever be surrounded by authenticity if you're not putting it out yourself.
Real gets real.
Yes.
The real work.